Real quick show of hands, how many people are using HubSpot today? All right, how many people are using the Marketing Hub and the Sales Hub? Okay, so fair split. Was it mostly, if you have the Marketing Hub, are you also using the Sales Hub? Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, we're gonna chat about best practices for getting data into HubSpot, how we can use that data in HubSpot, and then also some bi-directional things that you can do with that information that you have in HubSpot. For a little bit of context, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up like 4 miles away from the HubSpot office. Boston? Hell yeah. So like half of my high school works at HubSpot now. We've been working with them very closely for a number of years. We were the first, Accelevents was the first company that was a certified HubSpot integration partner in the event management space. Just real quick on Accelevents, we are an event management platform. So everything from registration to virtual events, mobile app for attendees, lead capture for exhibitors, all of that under one roof. And then obviously a critical bit of that is getting the information that you need into the places that you need it. So for today, what I want to do, as much as I love HubSpot, I want to talk about why a CRM isn't an event management platform. Then we're going to talk about the difference between event attribution versus registration attribution. We'll talk about where to store data in HubSpot and best practices for doing so, as well as what I mentioned before, getting data out of HubSpot and using that in your event process. And then finally, some questions that you're going to want to ask as you're evaluating event management platforms and thinking about what you need in an integration. So right off the bat, you see this more at the top of the sort of food chain in the marketing team, right? CMOs, CFOs, everybody wants to talk about what data they can capture. There's not enough focus on what we're actually going to do with that data. And inevitably what happens is we go and we try to capture everything, and that just creates a lot of noise. Look, the reality is a CRM is a tool for taking action. It's not a CDP. It's not the place that every single piece of data needs to live. That just gets in the way and it creates a lot of noise. So one of the really big differences between a CRM and an event management platform is a CRM, it's a lifecycle tool. It's designed to be a real-time metric of each contact, each deal that you're working. What it's not designed for is capturing point-in-time information. So for example, somebody registers today, there's information about where they came from, then what led to them registering. There's information like meal choice. All of that is point-in-time information. It doesn't need to live in your CRM. It's just noise there. So if you think about like a contact property in HubSpot, right, that information is always supposed to be up-to-date information, real-time information. All right, so let's talk about the difference between event attribution and registration attribution. When it comes to what we are doing in HubSpot, that's where event attribution comes into play. We want to be able to understand how much each of our events is actually driving business for us. How is it generating ROI? And when we go back to that concept of understanding the life cycle of a contact or a deal, that's where these events come in as individual touch points along the way. But what we're not understanding in the CRM, or we don't need to be looking at, is things like what drove individual registration. Now, I am going to mention some ways that you can get some of that information into HubSpot, but again, it's not a great tool for it because that data gets overwritten in those contact properties. If you're familiar with the original source properties in HubSpot, and then there's the last source properties. Those are the original source is always going to be static. So if a contact is being added to your CRM for the first time from an event, that information will go into those source properties. But if they register for subsequent events, that data is going to get overwritten in the CRM. Now, that's where the registration aspect in HubSpot starts to sort of break down. The other big piece is when we think about event attribution, what we're looking at here is there's no single event, at least in the B2B world, that's going to drive a contact to becoming a customer, right? There's a number of touch points that take place over time. As we think about looking and trying to drive attribution or measure attribution as a result of events, what we want to use is a much longer attribution window. In our company, we use a 365-day attribution window from things like this event or other events that we host or even other third-party events that we participate in. And in most B2B cases, I would encourage companies to do the same. In terms of how you're going to want to track that information in HubSpot, recently, within the past 6 months, they took the customer journey product as a reporting tool out of beta, so it's not generally available to everybody. And what you can do there is build tools to help understand, again, I'm speaking more in the B2B space here, but was the last sales meeting driven from an event interaction? So again, I'll use us as an example. We were at IMEX about 2 months ago. We had 81 meetings. What we wanted to measure there was how many of those meetings that had taken place on site led to a sales demo. And that's basically the attribution that we're considering there. Now, on the registration attribution side, it's much more direct response marketing. So if you're running a LinkedIn campaign, or you're using a referral tool like Gleanin or Ingo, somebody's clicking a link, maybe on LinkedIn or Facebook, and then they're converting, right? You have a direct action that's leading to that conversion event. Likely you're storing that information as UTM properties, and you're able to look at each attendee or each registrant in your event management platform and see what the driver of that action was. All right, now let's talk about how we actually get data into HubSpot. So everything starts here, obviously, in your registration platform. It's going to flow into really 3 different objects. So every event that you have in your event management platform, can you hear me when I step away from the mic? All right, I'll stay over here. Every event is going to tie out to a marketing event in HubSpot. This is an object that HubSpot released in early 2021. They haven't put enough investment into it, but I was chatting with the product manager for this object at Inbound about 2 months ago, and I can tell you they are putting a lot more investment into it. So there's going to be a child object that's coming soon that's going to help us to better understand the actual attendees within that object, because right now all you can really get is the contact that was associated. It's like first, last, an email address, and then there's 3 registration statuses, 4, registered, attended, canceled, and I'm blanking on the last one, but it's not a lot of information to really understand that attendee life cycle. The other thing is you can't nest those objects. So if you wanted to measure something like session registration, there's not a good way to do that in the native objects within HubSpot. Now, that's mapping an event to HubSpot. The next part is all of those people that are attending. So they're going to come in as contacts. And I'll talk a little bit more about how some of those properties can be mapped in a moment. But then to take things a little bit further, you may have a scenario where you actually have a sales team actively out there and selling group registrations. We have one customer, Valuetainment, they're a big media company in the States, and they have a sales team of 30 people that sell bulk registrations in value of $10,000 to $100,000 per bulk registration. And the sales team of 30 folks, they get paid commission for these sales. So every time they get a deal closed, the checkout process is they share a link from our platform that has a tracking link on it. That gets tied back to each of those individual sales reps, and then a deal gets created in a separate pipeline in HubSpot. They can see the revenue amount, all of the contacts for those individual tickets within that block get associated back to that deal, and then this company is able to actually measure the revenue for each sales rep and pay out commission, all tracked right within HubSpot. Coming back to the contact object, so somebody registers, either an existing contact already existed, we map to that contact and then tie that to that marketing event, or a new contact gets created. Now, as that attendee does things within the event, right? Maybe they're registering for sessions, they're participating in chat, polling, Q&A. Could be a virtual event where you want to measure how long somebody was in the session. All of that information, the best way to store that in HubSpot currently is actually through the timeline event. So the timeline event, I'm going to jump ahead here for a second. What that looks like is this right here. So this is a contact record in HubSpot. Each of these different rows here is representing different actions that person takes. And again, we don't want to bring things into our CRM that are just noise, right? It makes it harder for the sales team, the marketing team to do actionable things when they have to sort through a whole bunch of stuff that really doesn't matter. So again, you want to be specific and intentional about what information you are bringing into your CRM. And that's where you need to be provided those different options, and you can customize that on an event-by-event basis. Now I'm going to jump back here, and we already talked about these objects a little bit, but I do want to highlight one thing. If you only have the marketing hub, you're not going to have access to the deal object. Now that might not matter if you're not, if you don't have a sales team that's out there actively calling people and getting those transactions done, then you really don't have to worry about the deal object. But outside of selling bulk tickets, the one other place we see people using that is selling exhibitor space or sponsorship packages. What we do see is more and more people that are moving, frankly, away from Marketo over to HubSpot on the marketing side, and they're still using Salesforce on the sales side, but that's where you're bringing information in, primarily associated with a contact object, and then from a attribution measurement perspective, we're using the campaign object in Salesforce. So every one of your marketing events is going to be connected as an asset to that campaign in Salesforce. That's what allows you to look at a given event and see what converted and how much that actually drove in pipeline, and then close one business for your organization. So this is the marketing object here. This is an example of some of the events that we've recently ran at Accelevents. We've been doing a dinner series, traveling around the States. And what you can see here, of course, you can customize the columns, but you can see the number of people that registered. You can see the attendance rates for each of those. One thing that HubSpot recently added is the ability to actually upload a CSV of this information. Until about 3 months ago, you had to use an event management platform to actually use this marketing event object to get data into it. I will say, when this object was originally built, it was 2021, so they really thought about it from the perspective of virtual events and webinars, and it hasn't really extended to get everything that we would expect with in-person events yet. But again, I know they're doing a lot of work on that. So when you're looking at your list of events here, what you can do is click into any of these events and learn a little bit more information. You can customize all of the properties within the marketing event object. So if there's additional information that you want to track, maybe which department within your organization that event is associated with, or if you want to add fields related to budget, you can do all of that in here as well. And again, very recently, they announced this at Inbound, you can actually do reporting out on your marketing events within HubSpot. Here you can also see any associated campaigns that this event is connected to. And again, that's very important for doing your event level attribution. We already talked about the timeline event object here on the contact level. So let's talk about how we actually create a contact in HubSpot. Field mapping, pretty straightforward there. But when you're evaluating platforms, one of the things I would encourage you to investigate is what flexibility does that field mapping give you? You may not want to just overwrite every property that you're mapping every time you have a new registrant. So what we're doing here is giving the opportunity for each property per event to determine what you actually want that activity to do. So in some cases, you may always want to update that information. For example, a company property you may always want to update because that may be one mechanism that you use to see if people are switching jobs. But something like email address, well, we're mapping to that anyway, so you're not going to really be wanting to update that property, for example. Another scenario is you may want to populate a field only if that field is blank. If there's already existing values there, there's plenty of cases where you're going to want to keep that value because you don't want to interfere with some other form of reporting that's based on those fields. So again, it's important to make sure that the platform that you're working with gives you the flexibility to determine those rules on a per field basis. Another thing that's important to consider is going back to that concept of group booking. So especially in the B2B space, you often have a scenario where somebody is buying tickets on behalf of others, or they might be buying a block of tickets. They may be an exhibitor that gets granted a block of tickets, and they don't know everybody that's coming at that point in time. So as they go back into the event management platform and add those additional contacts, you want the flexibility to determine if that information is going to flow into HubSpot when those people are updated. The other thing to keep in mind is what you want to happen from, frankly, a GDPR perspective. Are those contacts going to be configured as marketing contacts in HubSpot, which allows you to email them? You're going to find often that there's settings in the event platform that configure that, but then there's also global settings that you can configure in HubSpot for each integration. So you can determine for a given integration, do I want every contact to come in as a marketing contact or not? All right, so I know I beat up a little bit on HubSpot as a tool for doing registration level attribution, but there are some options available within CRM, within HubSpot for doing that. And what I'm showing here is a configuration within the settings page of HubSpot where you can enable non-HubSpot forms. So if you have non-HubSpot forms enabled and you add the HubSpot JavaScript tracking to your event registration site, what this allows you to do is actually get that source tracking directly into HubSpot. So if you're familiar with the existing source tracking properties in HubSpot that I mentioned before, the original source and then original source drill down 1 and 2, this is the way that you're actually able to get that information into HubSpot. Just keep in mind, it's going to overwrite those the last conversion properties in HubSpot. So if you're an organization that cares mostly about the last conversion when somebody, say, booked a demo, then you may not want to use this because that event registration is going to overwrite that last demo booking field. The other thing to keep in mind if you do go this route, if your event platform is on a different URL than the rest of your HubSpot suite, you need to make sure that you go in there and you whitelist the domain of your event platform or you're not going to get any data from that. The other thing is if you're embedding the registration widget into your website, make sure that the platform you're working with supports the cross-domain tracking so that data can flow from your event site into the registration widget and then into HubSpot. All right, switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about, we just spent a lot of time talking about getting data into HubSpot. I want to talk about the inverse. How can we actually pull data from HubSpot in real time at the point of registration? So this little GIF is representing a scenario where what we're actually doing is validating a contact in HubSpot and checking their member status. So this is an example that work with an organization called Impact. They're, I think, like the third largest HubSpot agency. They run their events through us, and they have different membership tiers. So those members are first eligible to register for one ticket type that non-members wouldn't be eligible for. And then depending on the tier of membership they have, they automatically get a discount applied at the time of registration. And that's what you'll see right here, which is that discount automatically gets applied. So there's a lot of things that you can do to pull in data at the time of registration, again, using your CRM as a validation tool. And of course, this is not restricted to HubSpot, but a great example here. All right, so was anybody at Inbound? Awesome. At Inbound, HubSpot also announced a major enhancement to the lead scoring functionality, and they've been rolling out a couple new iterations to this since. So this is the new scoring tool. What I did is I just built an event engagement score component in here, and what I did is I said I want to award points based on registration or attendance for my events, and I want to split that up, bifurcate that based on an online event versus an in-person event. To me, if I meet somebody face-to-face, that's worth more than if I just engage with them online. So I granted more points for those engagements. This now is going to update in real time. It's going to show up as a contact property so I can understand who are my biggest event attendees, who are my biggest event advocates. The other thing I did is I added a decay factor here so I can see, okay, if I'm having drop-off over time, I want to understand that as well. So if you're an organization that's doing a lot of field marketing events, maybe you're doing road shows, or if you're hosting a lot of webinars or virtual events, I would highly recommend that you check out this option as well. All right, so to wrap up here, I want to talk about some of the things that you want to be asking your event management platform as it pertains to integrations. The first of which is that there's always the possibility of sync errors. Again, not to beat up on HubSpot too much, but if you're active HubSpot users, over the past 2 months we had a couple of outages. Some of them were lengthy. And when those outages occur, you still need to make sure that your data is flowing into the CRM. So another question that you're going to want to ask is not just if there's an active team monitoring those integrations, but also what's the back-end queuing and retry logic. So for example, what we do is we try to send the data to the CRM. If we get an error response, we try again in 2 seconds, and then 4 seconds, and then 8, and that continues and goes on, and it stays in a queue for up to 24 hours to make sure that even if there's some sort of outage or glitch on the HubSpot or the Salesforce side, that data is still queued up and does end up in the CRM as soon as that API comes back online. And of course, we have a team that's monitoring this as well to understand if we need to step in and help a customer, because sometimes it's not necessarily called a glitch or an outage on the recipient side, but there could be a field mapping issue. So you may be mapping a pick list from your registration platform over to HubSpot, and if those fields don't correlate perfectly, then again, you're going to have a sync error. The other aspect of it is this team going to help you determine what's the best way to think about the integrations for your workflows, right? These integrations, some of them out there are very surface level, they're very plug and play. Others are a lot more flexible and give you options to determine what the workflow is going to be and how that data is going to be managed. You want to find a team that's going to be able to work with you, that they know the CRM or the marketing automation platform that you're pushing data to inside and out, and can actually act as a consultant in that regard. Another question asked is, are these integrations unidirectional or are they bidirectional? Can we get data back from the event platform? So the example that we just talked about with membership status or discount codes, but another example may be that you're already registering people using HubSpot forms and you want to bring them in to your event management platform. Does the platform integrate with HubSpot workflows so that you can have some sort of trigger, maybe in addition to a list, maybe a form fill, and that actually flows people into your event management platform? If anybody's interested in seeing that, I can show that after as well. And then the final question is what we had talked about regarding using the source tracking in HubSpot. If you do prefer to do your reporting that way, then make sure that you do have the option to capture that non-HubSpot form data in the CRM, and that the cross-domain reporting, especially for the widgets, is available to you. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. I talk a lot about HubSpot and a lot about event management platforms online, so if we're not already connected, let's make that happen. If anybody has any other questions around either HubSpot or any other CRM or marketing automation platforms, also happy to chat about that. I'll be sticking around for a few minutes after.
Yeah, sure, unless anyone's got any questions kind of immediately that they want to ask in front of everyone. Yeah, we've got one over here. Yeah, there we go. Here we go.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
What event metrics have you seen be the most indicative of like intent to buy and like resulting conversion, at least just in your experience, whether your clients or like your own marketing?
The one that we're measuring most is what I mentioned before. It's we interact with somebody at an event and then we book the sales demo. That is the number one metric for us for event attribution.
Cool.
Thank you. Great question. Anyone else? Any more questions? Okay.